His office, his secretary, locked the door. "My name is Serena, and I got a call. Your husband isn't at work." I went to his office. His secretary locked the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see two shadows moving together, hear muffled laughter that made my stomach turn. I stood there for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. My hand still raised to knock, my wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. Then I heard her voice, young, breathy, familiar, saying his name the way I used to say it, the way a wife says her husband's name when the world disappears and only the two of you exist. Have you ever felt the exact moment your entire life cracks down the middle? Let me back up. 5 years ago, I married David Chen, thinking I'd found my person. We met at a corporate mixer where I was representing my family's mid-size manufacturing company, and he was networking for his startup consulting firm. He had this smile, confident but not arrogant, successful but approachable. We talked for 2 hours about everything from business strategy to childhood dreams. He told me he'd grown up poor, worked 3 jobs through college, built himself from nothing. I admired that. I'd been handed a management position in my father's company, and sometimes I wondered if I'd earned anything on my own. Our wedding was everything I'd imagined. My parents spent a fortune, invited 300 guests, hired a live orchestra. David's side of the church was notably smaller. His mother had passed away years before. His father wasn't in the picture, and he didn't have many close friends. "I'm a self-made man," he told me with pride. "Don't need anyone but you." At the time, I thought it was romantic. We bought a house in the suburbs with the money my parents gave us as a wedding gift. David's consulting business was growing steadily, and I was working my way up at Chen Manufacturing, learning every department from the ground up despite my last name being on the building. We talked about kids, about the future, about growing old together on a porch somewhere. Standard dreams. Beautiful, normal dreams. Then my father got sick. It started with fatigue. Then came the diagnosis, stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him a year, maybe 2, with aggressive treatment. Dad was 62 and had planned to work until 70, then hand the company over to me gradually. Cancer had other plans. Within 6 months, he was too weak to come to the office. The board was getting nervous. Clients were asking questions. Our biggest competitor was circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Dad called me to his bedside on a Tuesday morning. Mom was there, holding his hand, trying not to cry. "Serena," he said, his voice thin and papery. "I'm making you CEO, effective immediately. I know you're young. I know people will question it, but you're ready. You've always been ready." I wasn't ready. I was terrified. But I looked at his gray face and said, "I won't let you down." David was supportive at first. He'd come home, listen to me vent about supplier problems and union negotiations, and board members who looked at me like a child playing dress up. He'd pour me wine, rub my shoulders, tell me I was doing great. "You're stronger than you think," he'd say, and I'd believe him. But as the months passed and my responsibilities grew, something shifted. I was working 70-hour weeks, taking calls at midnight from our factory in Vietnam, flying to Chicago for client meetings, and barely making it home for dinner. David's business was doing well, or so he said, but I was too exhausted to ask for details. We stopped having real conversations, stopped having sex, stopped being us. "You're married to your job," he told me one night after I missed another dinner reservation. "My father is dying," I snapped back. "The company he built is my responsibility now. I thought you understood that." He'd looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. Resentment? Disappointment? "I understand," he said quietly. "I understand perfectly." 3 months after that conversation, my father passed away. The funeral was massive. He touched so many lives, employed so many families. I stood next to the casket in my black dress and gave a eulogy I'd written at 3 in the morning, my voice somehow steady while my insides were screaming. David stood beside me, held my hand during the service, played the perfect grieving son-in-law, The reading of the will happened a week later. Dad left the house and most of his personal assets to Mom. The company, Chen Manufacturing, with its 400 employees and $50 million annual revenue, came to me. 70% controlling interest. Mom got the remaining 30%, but signed over her voting rights to me. I trust you completely, she said, kissing my forehead. Make him proud. That night, David opened an expensive bottle of bourbon. To your father, he said, raising his glass. We drank in silence. Then he said, So you're really in charge now, the whole thing? I guess I am. He nodded slowly, staring into his glass. That's a lot of responsibility, a lot of power. Something in his tone made me look up. What do you mean? Nothing. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just thinking about our future, about what this means for us. I should have paid attention to that moment, should have seen what I see now looking back. But I was drowning in grief and spreadsheets and supplier contracts, and I missed the warning signs completely. Over the next year, I threw myself into running the company. I renegotiated our biggest contracts, streamlined production, cut costs without cutting jobs. I proved to the board, to our clients, to everyone who doubted me that I wasn't just Chen's daughter. I was a CEO who knew what she was doing. Revenue grew 15%. Employee satisfaction went up. We won industry awards. David's consulting business, meanwhile, seemed to plateau. He started coming home later, saying he was taking on new clients, expanding his network. I believed him because I was barely home myself. We were two ships passing in an empty house, waving from separate decks. Then came the affair. I didn't suspect anything at first. David had hired a new assistant, Emma, 24, fresh out of business school, eager and bright. He mentioned her occasionally. Emma organized the client files, or Emma suggested this new scheduling system. Normal boss stuff. I'd met her once at a company holiday party, remembered thinking she seemed sweet and professional. I started noticing small things. David smelling like perfume I didn't wear. Late night texts he'd angle his phone away from me to read. A new attentiveness to his appearance. Better suits, expensive haircuts, cologne that came in black bottles with French names. You look nice, I'd say. Got to impress the clients, he'd reply. The real kicker was when I found the credit card statement. He'd been sloppy, left it on his desk at home. Expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. Hotel rooms in the city when he supposedly had late meetings. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany's. I'd never received any Tiffany's jewelry recently. I felt sick. I felt stupid. But I needed proof. So I hired a private investigator, a woman named Janet with 30 years of experience and zero sympathy for cheating spouses. She followed David for 2 weeks. The photos she brought me were clinical and devastating. David and Emma having lunch, holding hands across the table. David and Emma entering a hotel at 2 in the afternoon. David and Emma kissing in his car outside her apartment. I'm sorry, Janet said, sliding the envelope across her desk. But now you know. Now I knew. I could have confronted him immediately, could have thrown the photos in his face and filed for divorce. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the lawyer's instinct I developed running a company. Gather all the information before you make your move. Maybe it was wounded pride, wanting to understand exactly how deep the betrayal went. Or maybe I just needed to know if there was more to the story than sex. I started paying attention, really paying attention. I noticed David taking phone calls in the garage, noticed him meeting with someone at coffee shops when he thought I was traveling. So I had Janet keep watching. 3 weeks later, she called me with something bigger. Your husband isn't having an affair, she said, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. I mean, he is, but that's not the main event. He's planning something else, something with Emma and your company. My blood went cold. What do you mean? I managed to get close enough to record a conversation. You need to hear this. She sent me the audio file. I listened to it alone in my office at midnight. The city lights spread out below my window like scattered diamonds. David's voice, clear and casual. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. The company, the assets, all of it. Chen Manufacturing will effectively become mine to control. Emma's voice younger, uncertain. But she's the CEO. She owns it. Community property, baby. What's hers is mine. And with her working herself to death, barely paying attention to anything outside that office, it'll be easy to start making moves. I've already got connections with Chen's biggest competitor. Once I'm in position, I can start steering contracts their way, create some strategic failures, tank the stock price. Then we propose a merger. From a position of weakness, I'll look like the hero trying to save the company while pocketing a fortune in the deal. My hands were shaking so hard I had to set the phone down. Emma again. What about Serena? A long pause. Then David, with a coldness that made my skin crawl. What about her? She'll be devastated, probably have a breakdown. Maybe she'll even step down voluntarily. If not, I'll help her along. A CEO who can't handle the stress, who's making bad decisions, whose personal life is falling apart, the board will have no choice but to replace her. Probably with me, especially after I prove myself as her supportive husband trying to hold things together. And us? We wait until the dust settles, then I'll divorce her. She'll get something in the settlement, sure, but by then I'll have restructured enough assets that it won't matter. We'll have everything we wanted. The money, the power, the company. Emma laughed. Actually laughed. You're brilliant. I know. The recording ended. I sat in that dark office and felt something break inside me. But not the way David probably hoped. Not a breaking that would make me weak, a breaking that burned away everything soft and left only steel. He didn't love me, had never loved me. I'd been a mark, a target, a stepping stone to wealth and power he couldn't earn on his own, despite all his self-made man bullshit. I cried for about 10 minutes, grieved the marriage that had never really existed. Then I wiped my face, made a pot of coffee, and started planning. If David wanted to play games with my company, I'd show him what a real CEO could do. First, I called my lawyer, not a divorce attorney, but our corporate counsel, a brilliant woman named Rachel who'd been with Chen Manufacturing for 20 years. I played her the recording. Holy shit, she breathed. Serena, this is corporate espionage. This is fraud. This is going to stay quiet for now, I interrupted. I need you to do something for me. Completely confidential. Not even the board can know. What do you need? A prenup audit? I need to know exactly what David is entitled to if we divorce. And I need you to review every contract, every access point, every place where he could potentially damage this company. Rachel worked fast. Within a week, I had the full picture. The prenup we'd signed was solid, but not perfect. David could claim some assets, but the company itself was protected as my premarital inheritance. That was good. But he'd been carefully positioning himself over the past year, attending board meetings as my spouse, getting friendly with key executives, learning our systems. He had enough access to cause serious damage if he wanted to. So I started cutting off that access, piece by piece, so gradually that no one noticed. I changed passwords, updated security protocols for cybersecurity reasons, reorganized reporting structures so the executives David had been cozying up to were no longer in positions to make major decisions without multiple approvals. I brought in a new CFO, someone brilliant and loyal who I'd headhunted from a competitor, and had her quietly audit every single financial process. At home, I played the oblivious wife, came home exhausted, complained about work stress, barely looked at David. It wasn't hard to pretend I didn't notice the affair. I was simply giving him what he expected, a wife too busy and tired to pay attention to her husband. Meanwhile, Janet kept gathering evidence. Photos of David and Emma, records of his meetings with executives from our competitor, Chen's biggest rival, Nightcorp Industries. Email exchanges where David was feeding them proprietary information about our bids and pricing strategies. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a plan to steal my company through marriage law. It was actual criminal corporate espionage. Perfect. 2 months after I'd first heard that recording, I had everything I needed. The question was how to execute the revenge. I could have gone to the police immediately, had David arrested. But that felt hollow, quick. He'd be gone, but the humiliation wouldn't be complete. The justice wouldn't be poetic. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt, the betrayal, the shock, the total destruction of everything he thought he'd built. So I planned something better. I scheduled a major board meeting, told everyone it was to discuss a significant strategic initiative for the company, invited all board members, key executives, our corporate attorneys. I also personally invited David, telling him I wanted him there for moral support during a difficult presentation. He'd smiled at me, kissed my cheek. Of course, honey. I'm always here for you. The night before the meeting, I finally made that call. The one about David not being at work. I'd arranged it with Janet. She'd called his office, confirmed he'd told his receptionist he'd be gone all afternoon for meetings. Then I'd gone to his office building, taken the elevator up, walked past the startled receptionist to his private office door, and found it locked. I could see the shadows through the frosted glass, hear the voices, Emma saying his name, my husband with his mistress in his locked office in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I'd smiled, taken out my phone, recorded a video of the locked door, the shadows, the sounds. Then I'd walked away without knocking. Now, standing in front of the Chen manufacturing boardroom, I felt calm, crystal clear. The conference room was full, 12 board members, 6 executives, 3 attorneys. David sat near the back, looking confident and supportive. Emma wasn't here, of course. She had no idea what was coming. I'd dressed carefully that morning. A navy suit my father had once said made me look like a president. My mother's pearl necklace, my wedding ring. I'd considered taking it off, but decided the symbolism of wearing it was better. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the head of the long mahogany table. I know you're curious about why I called this emergency meeting. I'm going to get right to it. I clicked the remote. The large screen behind me lit up with a photo of David and Emma kissing outside her apartment. The room went silent. David's face drained of color. Serena, what? I'm not finished. My voice was steady, cold. Over the past several months, I've discovered that my husband has been having an affair with his assistant, Emma Richardson. That's bad enough. But what I discovered next is why all of you are here. Another click. The screen showed email exchanges between David and executives at NightCorp. David has been systematically feeding proprietary information to our biggest competitor. Client lists, pricing strategies, bid details. He's been working with NightCorp to undermine Chen Manufacturing with the goal of forcing a merger that would have personally enriched him while destroying the company my father built. The board erupted, voices overlapping, some angry, some shocked. David stood up, his face red. That's insane! Serena, you're having a breakdown? Sit down. Rachel's voice cut through the noise. She stood, holding a document folder. Mr. Chen, you should stop talking immediately. Anything you say right now could be used against you in criminal proceedings. Criminal. The word hung in the air like smoke. I clicked again. The audio recording played through the conference room speakers. David's voice explaining his plan in perfect detail, his casual cruelty about my potential breakdown, his calculated strategy to steal everything. When it finished, the silence was absolute. David tried. I'll give him that. He tried to spin it, to explain it away, to claim the recording was taken out of context. But then I showed the documentation, the paper trail of information he'd shared, the timeline of contract losses that corresponded with his meetings with NightCorp, the financial records showing payments he'd received into an account he thought I didn't know about. By the time I finished, he'd stopped protesting, just sat there, deflated, looking at his hands. The board has several decisions to make, I said calmly. First, we will be pursuing full legal action against David Chen and NightCorp Industries for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. Our attorneys are already prepared to file. Second, we will be conducting a complete internal audit to assess any damage done and prevent future breaches. And third, I paused, looked directly at David. I'm filing for divorce. As of this morning, you have been removed from our home, your belongings have been packed, and a restraining order has been filed, preventing you from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of this building or any Chen manufacturing property. You will receive nothing in the divorce settlement except what the prenup explicitly allows, which, thanks to your own criminal activity, is effectively nothing. Your consulting business, built largely on connections you made through me and my company, will collapse once our attorneys make your actions public. Emma Richardson has also been informed that she is named in the lawsuit and will likely face criminal charges as well. David's face crumpled. For just a second, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion, fear, regret, the realization that he'd destroyed everything. Then my CFO spoke up. For the record, I want to note that Serena's handling of this situation has been exemplary. She could have let her personal pain compromise the company. Instead, she protected Chen Manufacturing, gathered irrefutable evidence, and ensured that both the criminal and civil cases would be airtight. That's the mark of a true CEO. The board members nodded. One by one, they voiced their support, their confidence in my leadership, their gratitude that I'd caught this before the damage became irreparable. David was escorted from the building by security. I watched him go. This man I'd married, this stranger I'd never really known. He looked back once, maybe hoping to see me crying or angry. But I just looked back at him with nothing. Empty. Done. The legal proceedings took 8 months. David and Emma both faced criminal charges: corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, fraud. David tried to fight it, hired expensive lawyers with money he didn't have. But the evidence was overwhelming. He eventually took a plea deal: 5 years probation, a permanent injunction preventing him from working in our industry, and full restitution to Chen Manufacturing. Emma got less, cooperated with prosecutors, testified against David, claimed she'd been manipulated. Maybe she had been. Maybe she was just young and stupid and fell for a con man. I didn't care enough to decide. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning. I signed the papers in Rachel's office, officially ending a marriage that had been dead for longer than I'd realized. David got a settlement of $50,000 in his car. Everything else stayed with me. Nightcorp settled our lawsuit quietly for an undisclosed sum that was substantial enough to fund our expansion plans for the next 2 years. Their CEO was forced to resign. 3 of their executives were fired. Our competitor was weakened, and we were stronger. Chen Manufacturing thrived. We expanded into 2 new markets, opened a facility in Texas, hired 100 more workers. Revenue grew 32% in the year following the scandal. Industry publications ran stories about our resilience, about how I'd protected the company. I won CEO of the Year from a major trade organization. My mother was proud. "Your father would be so proud," she told me, tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save the company, you made it better." But the professional success wasn't what healed me. It was something smaller, quieter. 6 months after the divorce, I went to therapy, worked through the trust issues, the trauma of betrayal, the complicated grief of losing someone who'd never really existed. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson with gray hair and steady eyes, helped me understand that David's betrayal wasn't about me, wasn't about my worth or my lovability. It was about his emptiness, his greed, his fundamental inability to value people over things. "You're not broken," she told me in one session. "You're strong. You loved someone fully and honestly, and that's not a weakness. What he did is not a reflection of who you are." I started rebuilding my life, made time for friends I'd neglected, took a pottery class and discovered I was terrible at it but loved it anyway. Went on a vacation to Greece with my mother, spent 2 weeks eating good food and swimming in clear water and not thinking about spreadsheets. And eventually, carefully, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Coffee dates, dinners, learning to trust my instincts about people. learning that not everyone was a con artist wearing a marriage mask. I met Daniel at a charity fundraiser. He was a high school history teacher who volunteered with an after-school program I donated to. We talked for an hour about teaching and learning and why history mattered. He didn't know who I was at first, didn't know about Chen manufacturing or my divorce drama. When he found out later, he just shrugged. "That sounds like it was really hard," he said simply. "But you made it through." We've been dating for 6 months now, taking it slow, no rush. He makes me laugh, listens when I talk about work, doesn't try to fix everything, just supports me. It's different from what I had with David. Real, honest, built on actual foundation instead of pretty lies. Sometimes I wonder what David is doing now. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's working sales for a small firm in another state, living in a studio apartment, still paying off legal fees. Emma moved back to her hometown, got engaged to someone else. Nightcorp never fully recovered from the scandal. I don't feel victorious about their failures. Mostly, I feel nothing. They're characters in a story that's over, a chapter I closed and put behind me. The company my father built is stronger than ever. I'm stronger than ever. Not because I got revenge, though I did perfectly, completely, but because I learned something essential about myself in the process. I learned that I could be betrayed, devastated, nearly destroyed, and still get up, still fight, still win. Not with anger or hatred, but with intelligence, strategy, and truth. That's the thing about real power. It's not about control or dominance or crushing your enemies. It's about knowing who you are, what you stand for, and refusing to be anyone less than that even when the world tries to break you. Last month, I hung a photo of my father in my office. It's from the day I graduated college, both of us grinning at the camera, his arm around my shoulders. Every morning when I come in, I look at that photo and think about what he taught me. About integrity, about resilience, about building something that lasts. Make him proud, my mother had said. I did, not by being perfect or by never failing or by never getting hurt, but by surviving the hurt, learning from the failure, and choosing every single day to be someone worth being proud of. The industry knows me now not as the woman whose husband betrayed her, but as the CEO who protected her company, who led with strength and intelligence, who turned a potential disaster into a triumph. That reputation, earned through pain and perseverance, is worth more than any revenge. But I won't lie. Watching David escorted out of that boardroom by security, his carefully constructed con falling apart around him, his face pale with the realization that he'd underestimated me completely, that felt pretty damn good too. The truth is, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about building yourself into someone who can't be destroyed. It's about looking at betrayal and choosing integrity anyway. It's about taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and transforming it into proof of your strength. I'm not the same person I was when I stood outside that locked office door, heartbreaking, world crumbling. I'm better, wiser, stronger, more compassionate somehow, because I know what it feels like to be hurt that deeply. And I know now with absolute certainty that I can handle whatever comes next, because I've already survived the worst, and I'm still here, still standing, still building. That's not just revenge. That's victory. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. But don't let them define who you become.